Greetings and good Friday morning, this 19th of August, 2022, third decade of the 21st century. I always do that little bit of a preamble because if you're new to my channel and this is your first time, congratulations. Uh, I always mention that as a matter of creating contrast, where if you're someone like me, close enough in age, Gen X, certain people predicted where we would be as a society in the third decade of the 21st century. And I'm always amazed and somewhat astonished and shocked at where we are versus where people predicted us to be. So, that and many, many, many other reasons caused me to form this channel. Um, One of the things I like to do is I try to encourage conversation through the comments section. I'm also welcome to the idea of doing a Zoom call and recording the Zoom call if anybody's interested. But um, whether it's me, whether it's other circumstances, uh, life, the two people I've had Zoom call with me have either since then found themselves busy or unable to do it anymore. But I've at least had one viewer who consistently provides feedback, and that is Stace Catalan, who I'm going to read her response and react and respond to it in kind. And this is about some socio-political stuff. In another video I'll do after this, it's about some more nerdier, geeky stuff. So without further ado, reading, reacting, and responding to Stace over socio-political stuff part 2, which would make this part 3. All right. So, continuing on the conversation with the whole Alex Jones thing, $50 million is chump change for Alex Jones. He won't be filing for bankruptcy anytime soon. The other issue was that Jones's lawyer was as bright as a toothpick. Nice one. His lawyer released all of Alex Jones's text history for 2 years and did not even object with privileged information. Thus, those texts will eventually be used as part of the January 6th investigation. The issue is beyond saying that it was a hoax. There were also accusations of crisis actors. Thus, the families were affected beyond just saying you didn't have the child or that the child was never lost. This first trial is going to be one of many. All right, that was your first paragraph. Um, Believe it or not, between Russell Brand and my therapist, that's how I developed my information on Alex Jones. I'm not a big fan of major media conglomerates and or other internet-based sources, maybe other than Google Scholar. So what I'll say to this, whether we're responding directly to Stace or anybody else listening, first and foremost, not exactly a big fan of Alex Jones. I'm just not. Um, his shtick, his mantra is he likes to peddle in conspiracies. He uses various facts, whether coincidental or not, to support his conspiracy theories, and every once in a blue moon, he's right. Unfortunately, when it came to Sandy Hook, what I eventually discovered, Stace, was that some of his followers, some of his believers, I guess, if you will, decided to take matters into their own hands and started acting adversely against the parents. So to anybody else who's not entirely familiar, to draw an example for you, Amber Heard said some things about Johnny Depp. Now, by themselves, it is what it is, freedom of speech, what have you. Whether truthful or not, what have you. There would not have been a case for Johnny Depp if her words didn't result in direct negative and adverse actions against him, like him being released by Disney and fired from the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise and what other projects he may have lost as a direct result of the things that she said, and people like major companies, film production studios and whatnot, deciding to believe her because of Alex Jones's conspiracy theories about Sandy Hook. Um, some of his followers and believers decided to take actions against some of the families. Apparently, some of the families were doxxed. They were receiving threats at work, threats at home. Um, some of them did not feel safe to leave. Some of them didn't feel safe at work. So it did technically result in adverse actions being taken against the families as a direct result of what he said. In which case, resulting in, yes, a lawsuit for slander and libel against Alex Jones, which, yeah, I'm trying to think of the best way to put it. Yeah, ultimately, if your words lead to others taking action and you're the one responsible for it, I get it. And I'm not saying this in the exact same context as Donald Trump, since January 6th was mentioned. When it comes to Donald Trump, what a lot of news agencies did or media outlets did was they selectively edited some of the things that he said during January 6th regarding the election. And then, of course, what we've learned in recent events is that there are people who specifically, uh, I don't know if they're hired, I don't know, I won't pretend to know where they come from, other than their sole purpose in life is to agitate. Just like we know in Michigan, um, one of the agencies, I think the FBI, was weaponized against a group of individuals and basically entrapped them, baited and trapped them in a conspiracy to kill Gretchen Whitmer. So the unfortunate truth is, when it comes to Alex Jones, there's always a hint of truth, but it's one of those things where he more than likely has to be more mindful and put more disclaimers out there. In which case, he may not have been treading lightly with his disclaimers, like, look, this is just what I think. By no means am I telling anybody to do anything. And it's sad, especially as somebody who's lost a child. Um, I can only imagine, you know, when my son passed away, we went through some rough patches. What I'll share with Stace and anybody else is this: I was freshly out of the service. I retired February 28th, which means basically March 1st I was a full blown civilian. March 7th, my son passed away. I was fortunate to have a job at the time, but things would eventually spiral from that point forward. I would lose my position, acquire a new one, and then eventually have to leave the company altogether. Uh, we had a tremendous amount of difficulty, and I say we, even though I was the one going out on job interviews, good, bad, or indifferent, when people would ask, because I guess on my resume, when you talk about like where you worked and whatnot, everybody seemed to focus heavily on the fact that I just recently relocated to Raleigh. And maybe it's a character flaw of my own, but I never had a good prepared response, and I always told the truth. I relocated for my son. And I tried. I got to the point where I didn't just divulge the information. I would only answer if asked. Um, and I can only imagine for other people how off-putting it was. But apples and oranges, they're not quite the same. Yeah, Alex Jones. Uh, there's no love lost. I don't really have anything for him. If I had to make a comment, my only concern would be, we're hearing about it. And are we hearing about it because he is in some way, shape, or form associated with the right? And therefore, since he's associated with the right, that's the only reason we're hearing about it, as a means to exacerbate and develop increased negative emotions towards people who are right of center or conservatives or Republicans or all of the above. It's always been my opinion that the overwhelming majority of media outlets are like a propaganda machine for the Democratic Party, very liberal, very left leaning, etc. And I often wonder if the same principles are being applied towards people who are equally guilty on the left. And that's, if I had to provide any kind of feedback, that's really all I would say in regards to, if Alex Jones is being held accountable for people who listen to him taking matters into their own hands and acting upon it, then what about politicians or celebrities or uh, media personalities who put out, bad information and cause others to act, like in the case of Nick Sandman or in the case of Kyle Rittenhouse, Portland, Oregon, Seattle, Washington, Kenosha, Wisconsin, and many other places where there doesn't seem to be any repercussions. I mean, if I was somebody like a business owner who was adversely affected, why can't those individuals treat others the same way that Alex Jones is being treated? And I don't know if it's being equally applied. I sincerely don't, but I think it's a valid question to ask. If it's acceptable to go after Alex Jones, it should be equally acceptable to go after these other people, groups, whatever. But before I fall further down that rabbit hole, let's see what you have. Let's see what you also have to say. Now, I fight for the First Amendment for everyone, even those I disagree with. If I don't support the right of someone I disagree with, I have no rationale to only support the right of those I agree with. Fair statement. I also kind of disagree with asking singers to change their lyrics, but that's a whole other topic. I'm open to listen to anything that actually supports the Republican Party, minus all the religious standpoints. Libertarian Party, Democratic Party, Green Party, Independent Party, Freedom Party, etc. However, I will not discuss my views on the raid. Okay. I think there's some stuff to respond to there. So yeah, I was hinting around the fact that with my limited knowledge of Alex Jones, whether or not there was a violation of the First Amendment, I do believe in freedom of speech. However, I also agree with the fact that while you may have the freedom to say what you want, if it leads to some very direct and adverse outcomes, there should be some accountability for it. Uh, it- Stace, you brought up the parties, so I feel like I need to comment on that. Right now, our political machine is at a point where, while other parties may exist, they just don't have the same power and pull and representation as the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, which is funny because they both, initiated, um, with humble beginnings, so to speak. I mean, the Democratic Party was the original party of the Confederacy of the succeeding South, and the Republican Party was founded by, if my memory serves me correctly, a black man, I think a former slave, Frederick Douglass. Abraham Lincoln was its first political figure that most people will directly associate with the Republican Party. But they're so big right now. I mean, anytime you see a debate, with the exception of maybe Ross Perot, you never see anybody from the Green Party. You never see anybody from the Tea Party, Independent, whatever. It's always just them two, Republican and Democrat. And I disagree with that. I disagree that the assumption is, thanks to big media, that those are our only choices. Those are our only options. Why don't we get to hear the others? If there's only one candidate from this other party, why are they not on the stage competing with, say, Donald Trump, say, Joe Biden? But I digress. Conversely, because of the the proposed unchecked power and authority these parties assume that they have, I'm going to stumble over this a little bit and bear with me. I understand that from a popularity perspective, Donald Trump was not winning any contests. He may have done some good things economically, policy wise, that some people may not agree with just because they don't like him, and that goes right back to our confirmation bias. Um, it's one of those things where it doesn't really matter how much good he did, because when he'd get on Twitter, when he'd get in front of a camera, he would just say stuff that was so alarming and distracting that it overshadowed all of his accomplishments. Like, these are his physical accomplishments, but then his personality just gets in the way. Um, I say all that because like many people, I understand this compulsion. I didn't vote for Donald Trump as much as I voted against Hillary. I didn't vote for Donald Trump as much as I voted against Joe Biden. I understand that compulsion, people voting against Donald Trump and not necessarily for somebody. I fail to believe that 80 million Americans took to the streets and voted for Biden, even if it was against Trump. That for the first time in American history, we had more legal, registered voters vote in a presidential election. That I find hard to believe. I believe shenanigans have always happened. They just happened at a much smaller scale to where it goes relatively unnoticed. Um, so and that's as somebody who may have done some things in the past, that's typically how you do it. Um, you do it you do it at such a scale where it goes relatively unnoticed and it doesn't draw a lot of attention, so that people don't go looking for it. I think in this particular circumstance, and I'll just give you my 2 cents. I think what happened is, whether it was communicated, whether it was pre-planned, premeditated, you had a lot of independent factions, perhaps independent locations, thinking the same thing at the same time. All right, we're just we're just going to take a couple extra inches. All right, we're going to push the envelope just a little bit and see if it helps. But maybe it happened in mass, without premeditation, without pre-planning, just purely coincidental, and it resulted in 80 million plus votes for Biden. It's it's the voting for Biden that I have the problem with, I guess. But I digress. This is me taking advantage of my First Amendment. I'm not the first person to say it. I think any and all actions that would result from that have already happened. Therefore, I don't think I can really be held accountable for anything, because I'm not the first person to say it. I think all actions to take place have already taken place. So beyond that, it gets to another point too. The fact that we feel stuck with this two-party system. I despise the Democratic Party just on legacy and history alone. So I could never vote for a Democrat, even if we get another John F. Kennedy. All right. Specifically, that's why I didn't vote for Obama. It had nothing to do with his skin complexion. Wasn't exactly a big fan of his policies. I just cannot vote for a Democrat. Like you, Stace, I'm not entirely in love with the Republican Party. When the parties decided to make some pivotal changes, the Republican Party decided to get in bed with the church. And I personally think it was a mistake. I know that there's an awful lot of people who have faith and think it was a great idea, think it was smart. Excuse me. I don't. Um, I think I think what it ends up doing is, people who are more in the middle. I think the heavy indoctrination, or the heavy imposition of religious stuff. I apologize for losing my vocabulary. Uh, Puts people off. Um, I know some people uh, are single issue voters. I respect that. I know some people are personality voters. I get it. I know, some people have their reasons for voting. I've always wanted to look for a third party candidate. I've always wanted the option to have a third party, a viable third party. I've looked into the Green Party, and I've looked into their platforms, and I've looked into their candidates and what they stand for. And it's like, are you serious? I mean, just my opinion. Um, I've looked at other candidates, to give them a fair shake, and there's just something about them where it's like, okay, that's cool. That okay, that's cool too. Yeah, okay, I get it. And then it gets this like a couple things, and it's like, oh my god, you're way off the deep end. Um, and to go even further, right? Uh, we're at this point now where we have this identity politicking. And Stace, I think you'd mentioned it with your mom, where your mom, if you and your mom start talking anything socio-political, it devolves quickly to where your mom starts calling you names and whatnot, which is part of the reason I started this channel in the first place. Is we've got to try to overcome some of the division. We can disagree spiritedly on any number of topics without necessarily calling each other names, at least not with our heart and soul. Like if I was to say something like, oh, what are you, an idiot? There's two different ways to say that. There's, what are you, an idiot? With no backing behind it, just like, oh, come on, you can't be serious. And then there's, what are you, an idiot? Where I'm literally with my heart and soul behind it, suggesting a lack of intelligence. But yeah, I think we can disagree spiritedly, whether it's you and I, Stace, or anybody else for that matter. I think the problem is when we start drawing these hard lines in the sand, and this is a concept I've talked about numerous times. And I feel as though the media outlets, social media, you name it, are trying to do just that. And I've always questioned why. If I can put my Alex Jones hat on for a second, why? What is your ultimate end game? Because look at what it's doing. It's creating these personality conflicts like the one Stace has with her mom. Where her mom makes some very derogatory statements towards her own daughter over differences in sociopolitical leanings. Um, and then speaking of popularity contests and where we start to devolve into the realm of nonsensical. I'll give you an example. I'll give you two examples actually. I personally think Dr. Fauci's a hack. I think he's less of a doctor, more of a politician. I don't think our country's response to COVID was appropriate. Others may disagree. Others may feel differently. Others may be immunocompromised, have various opinions for the subject. That's fine. You're allowed to do that. You're allowed to feel however the hell you want. Just like I'm allowed to feel how I feel and express how I feel. I think Dr. Fauci's a hack. I think he's more of a politician than he is a doctor. And I think a lot of this whole COVID pandemic was a belligerent opportunity to weaponize an idea to basically sabotage a president. And I don't think our country's response was appropriate to include local municipalities, states, etc. So let's go in a different direction. Abortion. First and foremost, I hate the way that it's being presented. All right. I hate the way that it's being communicated to stir up a frenzy to misinform people for the purpose of soliciting potential votes. There is no right within the Bill of Rights of the Constitution regarding abortion, which is why it was bad constitutional law and overturned by the Supreme Court. Now, anybody who sat through eighth grade history knows how this works. A new amendment to the Bill of Rights can be ratified, all right? And we can, as a public, we can have, we even have within our Constitution the opportunity to nationally vote. It's within the Constitution. We can vote as a nation. The Congress, the Senate, and the President can all come together and create an amendment to the Constitution, making an abortion a civil right. That's entirely possible. And then once that happens, it falls under the purview of the Supreme Court, which is their job. So they kicked it back down to the states. That's where the discussion really begins. Some states are going in an extreme hard left direction. Some states are going in an extreme hard right direction. Like I think Colorado allows abortions up to like 8 months, and I don't know if that has anything to do with the viability of the child, health of the mother just at 9 months if the mom's like, I'm just not ready for this yet. So I don't know how true that is. I do know in some extremely conservative states, they're putting in some laws that just don't make any good common sense. To include, they don't make any medically appropriate common sense or scientifically appropriate common sense. You know, like Stace was saying in Texas, if a man rapes a woman, the woman gets pregnant. While he may be convicted of rape and do time, his family can sue for custody. So his mom and dad, his brothers, whatever. I don't know the statutes, but can sue for custody. Some states are not even willing to consider things like ectopic pregnancies, health of the mother, health of the child. They're just taking such a hard stance. Like it's some sort of a, I don't know, just like in the realm of making uh what's why is my vocabulary hurting so much? Like one of those, how do I phrase this? Like kind of like, look what we're doing, like atop that, if you will. Like, oh, you're going that far, look at how far we're going. And ultimately what people don't seem to understand that are making these stupid decisions is you're adversely affecting a decent population. All right. You have medical providers who want to ensure that it's done in a safe, sanitary, and ultimately legal condition. You have people who, for various reasons, need it beyond like, oh, I don't want the child. And it's just one of those things where I don't think common sense and logic is being applied. And it's probably going to be a very divisive issue. And I also don't know how much of it is truth and how much of it is hyperbole. In which case that goes back to communication. If that's not entirely true and it's being miscommunicated, that's what we as the voting public are hearing. The people who will either vote or the people that will more than likely have to find another way to take action to basically prevent a lack of common sense from occurring. So I know I've probably danced around a few subjects there. Stace, I respect your decision, um, but being my channel, you may not be the only one watching. When it comes to Mar-a-Lago, my greatest concern is this. I understand Donald Trump did not exactly win a popularity contest with a portion of the United States. If there's any truth to the fact that agencies within our government are being weaponized to silence or discredit or potentially, what's the other word I'm looking for? Prohibit or inhibit or uh, in any other shape or form prevent uh, political dissidents or rivals or competitors from competing against the existing powers. Like there's rumor that Barack Obama weaponized the IRS against his political dissidents. Um, so my point is this, and I have 2 points on this. I'm concerned that federal agencies within the United States government are being weaponized against a citizen, a former political figure, with the sole purpose of defaming their character and potentially creating the idea that there's any reason whatsoever to disallow that person from running from office again. And I'm even more concerned as to whether or not there is 100% legitimacy behind their actions. And I'll be interested to hear the fallout. The problem we run into, not to bounce back and forth, is confirmation bias. If you already don't like Trump, if you don't like Republicans, whatever the case may be, then you're probably less than interested in the legalities of it. You're probably less than interested in whether or not these agencies are being weaponized, whether it's fair, whether it's appropriate, whether it's legal. And I'm not accusing anybody of anything per se, because we can just as easily flip that. And that's one of my other concerns, is if turnaround is fair play, if what's good for the goose, Ginger, if what's good for the goose is good for the gander, then imagine, if you will, if the Republicans take over the White House, if they take over the Congress and they take over the Senate, and they purge these federal agencies at the highest levels, all right, of liberal left leaning individuals, and replace them with right leaning individuals, and then equally weaponize these agencies against the Democratic Party, against left leaning individuals, candidates, political dissidents. While it's just as fair as what the Democrats are doing right now, does it repair the wounds in this country? Does it satisfy the overall citizenry of this country? All right. While it's fully appropriate and fair, you did this to us, now we're going to do it to you. Does it ever stop, or is it a constant tit for tat, one-upsmanship? But I digress. So, first and foremost, is it fair? Is it legal? Was it appropriate? Was it done appropriately? Or are we going to find out that there was some jackassery going on? And then, for anybody else watching this, do you think that if the Republicans take over, they should purge these agencies of people who are not thinking clearly or rationally, and they're allowing their socio-political beliefs to cloud their judgment in order to weaponize their agencies against those they disagree with? Um, I think that's probably the best way I can put it, because while I agree the Republicans and or the right of center should be allowed to do the same, I don't know if that fixes anything. I don't know if that puts things back in balance, or if it's just a constant volley back and forth. And ultimately, I think what happens is, while these two parties volley back and forth for position, it's we the people that ultimately suffer, because whether we need to be reminded of it or they need to be reminded of it, we elect these people. All right. These people have next to no power. They're supposed to be public servants. They're supposed to serve and protect our civil liberties and look out for our best interests, which is why we elect them. We pick and choose who we want to represent us. They win a popular vote within their area of responsibility, and they're supposed to directly represent us. I want to say my representative is Murphy from the 3rd District of North Carolina. He is supposed to represent the 3rd District of North Carolina, not his own self interests. And I think at some point we got to try to find a way to get back to that. But I've been babbling for over 33 minutes. I'm going to put this to an end to get it published. Stace, I always love hearing back from you. I really appreciate you communicating with me. It gives me something to do. I even more enjoy it when we do our geeky stuff, which is next. That's my next video. So for anybody else, if you're new to my channel, I don't care if you like, dislike, hit subscribe, hit the notification bell. I'm not in it for anything other than I just want to create discussions. I just want to see if we can talk to one another, even if we don't agree. I'm not here to make fun of you. I'm not here to label you. I'm not here to put you down. And trust me, and you can even ask Stace. You can ask Stace in the comments. It's happened on this channel. People tried to provoke me. People were very rude. People had a lack of decorum. I won't go there. I just won't. I won't go there. I'll respect what you have to say. I'll respect that based on the life that you lead. This is where you got to where you're at, and how you think the way that you think, and how you feel the way you feel. I may ask you to not defend it, but back it up a little bit. But other than that, I like to hear from people. So if you do get involved, if you do leave a comment, I appreciate it. You're awesome. Till next time.